Ram Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Vishnupada Satyasri Srimad Divine Graces Kantamacharya Srila A.C. Indradyumna Swami Srila Ram Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Vishnupada Satyasri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ram Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Vishnupada Satyasri Srimad Gokashore Dastarji Maharaj Ram Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Vishnupada Satyasri Srimad Satchidananda Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Namacharya Srila Harish Thakur Prem Sapaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Bhajabhumi Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Navadvip Maya Pradama Ki Dhamya Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki ISKCON really founder Charya saved the whole world. Shri Prabhupada Shri Prabhupada Shri Prabhupada All pregnant all glory to the Son, glory to the Son, glory to the Son, glory to Guru and Govinda. Om Agyan Siddhamdasya Gnana Shalakaya Shri Chaitanya Vishnu Shadham Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Ramayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vadesham Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Halim Shrom Om Param Kataka Hati I'm very happy to be here with all of you this evening as we were driving in from a little shopping spree we did in San Francisco, because I get all my necessities here in America from my travels around the world. In Russia and India and China, you just can't get some of the things that the traveling monks use in other parts of the world, so we were shopping. And I was thinking that I haven't done a home program in about 10 or 15 years. I usually do festival programs where we average around 5,000 people a night. So. There's mass and there's class. And of course I was thinking that all of you are being trained, enlightened, and inspired by my dear brother Devashishika Prabhu. So what can I add? We'll just take a shot. But a few words of wisdom are appropriate. Kaviraj Goswami states in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that elegance is truth spoken precisely. So there's much to be said about Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada liked to quote one verse, actually from Vedanta Sutra. Although Prabhupada didn't actually translate Vedanta Sutra, he may very well have done so had he lived a little longer, because it's the essence of Vedic knowledge. Sutra means like code. Like when I was in the military, they trained us in Morse code. I don't think they use this anymore. We have internet and various other means of communication, but when I was a soldier, we had to learn Morse code. And it was a series of taps that went across the wire system. And we could say a paragraph in just a few. That means, how are you doing? So, the four Vedas, which contain the wisdom of our culture, our Krishna conscious culture, they're given in concise code or sutras in Vedanta. Vedanta is the summary of the Vedas, because who has time to read the Vedic scriptures in total in this age of Pali? We don't have the time, we don't have the ability, we don't have the intelligence. So Vedanta Sutra means code. And the very first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra, Prabhupada liked to quote, Atato Brahma Jignasya. And those of you who are seers of the truth, you'll remember this verse immediately. It means, now that we've come to the human form of life, what is our business? Inquiry into the absolute truth. That is the business. Here in America, they once asked one of our former presidents, which most of you probably don't know unless you've studied American history. They asked President Truman, that was a famous interview, they asked President Truman, when he just was elected as president, Mr. President, what is the business now of America? This is just after the war. He smiled, he said, the business of America is business. Making money. But according to Vedanta Sutra, that's not the business. The business of life is awakening our dormant Krishna consciousness. And we judge progress, not necessarily by our material progress, although it can facilitate us to a certain degree so that we're comfortable enough to sit and chant peacefully. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. But real progress is understood by how much advancement we make in spiritual life. Because at death, everything is finished. So how is that progress to you? Is everything? Krishna says in Gita that whatever progress we make in this lifetime, when we die, we begin where we left off. Actually, the sadhus in India, they say that human life begins when you make this inquiry into the absolute truth. Say you're 25 years old, your body, but you just began this pursuit of inquiry into spiritual life. Who am I? Where have I come from? Why am I suffering? Why am I death? Does God exist? They say that when you begin that inquiry, at that point human life begins. Before that, it's basically animal existence. We're doing the same things as the animals, but in a little more refined manner. That's all. Nothing so special. So if you began your inquiry when you met one of the, what do you call them, spiritual warriors here? Weekend warrior. If you're a weekend warrior, a samurai on the street with your sword and your outfit looking like a ninja. Is that how you do it? And you have books. And you meet someone and that person buys the book, then he's interested, he goes home and reads it. At that point his human life begins, according to the rishis. So although he's 25, he's 1 day old. That's how it's measure. King Dasharatha was of course, the illustrious father of Lord Ramachandra. He was a very powerful king. He was a Raj Rishi. He was Raj. He had the abilities as a Khatri to protect and uplift the citizens spiritually, but he was Rishi also. He was learned in the science of Krishna consciousness. So one day, a great sage, Vishwamitra Muni, came to visit him. Because that's the real business of sages, not just simply be interested in their own spiritual emancipation, but to share the good fortune with others. But typically in our Vedic culture, sages would wander. And they were allowed free access to the palace, because the king has a lot of worldly duties to do. And as a result of that association, he sometimes has to be reminded of his ultimate duty of Krishna consciousness. So the sages, they were welcome. They didn't need a pass. They didn't need permission. They could just walk into the palace as they liked and sit down and begin some bhajan and some katha. And the members of the royal family or the ministers or the public, everyone could come and hear them. This was the beauty of Vedic culture. They didn't need passports. They could travel anywhere in the world without visas. If only that could be now. It would make life so much easier for me. It takes so long, it's so expensive to get my Russian visa. So, one time Vishwamitra Muni, he came to the palace of King Dasharatha. Of course, King Dasharatha doesn't need any instruction or enlightenment. He's the father of God, so to speak. So elevated is his position that he appears to take the position of the father of God. It's one of the rasas, Prachamba rasa, Krishna. So Dasharatha was giving counsel, and Vishwamitra Muni just walked up to the palace and opened the doors by his mystic power, and he walked into the assembly hall. And all he was wearing was his loincloth and his kamadala, his water pot. And we can imagine he also had a set of mala in which he was chanting the names of Ram. But when he came in, everyone bowed down, including the king. Someone might be surprised. The king, with his royal robes and his jewelry and his weapons and his entourage and his army and his treasury and his fame and his prestige, is bowing down to somebody who has nothing. It might be confusing to the layman. But King Dasharatha was an enlightened soul, and he knew that actually the most opulent person was the rishi, because he possessed love of God, which is the real riches, because it gives shantushti, it gives genuine satisfaction and joy to the heart. And the most opulent person is not the one who has material possessions, which don't give any lasting pleasure, but has the prema, the love of God. That's ananda. That pleasure is always increasingly, unlimited, unlimited, unlimited. We call it the treasure chest of love of God. So out of respect for the humble sage who had this prema, the king got off his throne and he did dandavats to the rishi. He's laughing. Oh, oh, oh. Sadhus are very joyful because they're on the path back home, back to Godhead. And when the king got up and sat back on his throne, he invited the sage to sit down, and he asked him a very relevant question, which Prabhupada used to share with his audiences. King Dasharatha said to Vishwamitra Muni, Mardu Muni, how is your progress on the path of overcoming the repetition of birth and death going? He said like that. He didn't say, I don't know if any of you are from South Africa. In South Africa, when you meet someone, you say, how you keeping, man? How you keeping? Or here in West, we'll shake hands. How you doing? Yeah, I'm doing okay, I'm fine. How's the wife? How's work? How's your health? It's terrible. No, we didn't bother with these things. We know materially, sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. Mostly we're down. That's not the real business. The real business, despite whatever situation we may be in this world, is to make progress. So we ask this question. How is your endeavor to conquer over the repetition of birth and death going, my dear sage? He said, it's going very nicely. Because Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram Sitaram Jai Sitaram Sitaram Jai Sitaram. He was in full Krishna consciousness or Ram consciousness. So this is the real progress. So we should emulate that. We should know that. We should get an education. We should get our career. We should find our soulmate, a wife or husband. We should have our family. We should be responsible citizens in our country. We should be conscious of the world situation, the environment, and contribute in a proper way. But we should know the real question is how much progress we're making overcoming the repetition of birth and death. We should judge our place in life by that question. And that can be facilitated by the path of spirituality, which in this age is characterized by Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare. Dhavantu Sakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. It's stated, but for the Lord, no one can introduce a process of self-realization. Only Krishna can do like that. Prabhupada used to give the example, if your hands are tied, you can't untie somebody else's hands. So from Brahma, with all due respect, of course our Brahma is special, he's a pure devotee. But Brahma is not always a pure devotee. Most of the time Brahma is not a pure devotee. Because when the living entity falls from grace, and the living entity falls from the spiritual world, because there's no sinful activity to speak of yet, just this rebellious spirit, which hasn't matured in the form of fruit of activity, or what to speak of sin. Your first birth is in Brahma. You have all been Brahmas. You all had 4 heads. And you had 4 headaches. Because to create this world is no small matter. This Brahman is the engineer of this universe, under the direction of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. So that was our first birth. When we fell from grace, we took birth as Brahma. So, irregardless of who we are in this world, our hands are tied. We're all conditioned from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. So, Dharmantu Sakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. But for the Lord, that path of spirituality cannot be introduced by anyone but the Lord. Therefore He comes out of His kindness in every particular age, because the ages are all different, they're never the same. Just like we have 4 seasons. Right now we're going into summer. And then we'll go into autumn. Then we'll go back into winter and again into spring. So Vedic knowledge reveals that there's 4 ages, so not the same. Just like in each of those seasons you wear different clothes. Now you're taking off your spring clothes. You still have a sweater, but in a few months you won't need a sweater. You'll have a t-shirt. But then autumn will come, you put the sweater back on, and then winter will come, you put on your coat, your down coat. So all the seasons are different. So the ages are different.